Welcome to another special edition of In the Labs with Todd. Nothing says Christmas like festive lights and music. Well, in this project I didn't quite nail the festive music, but I did the lights. With this project here, I hope you have a lot of fun creating a lit snowflake that you can hang on your wall throughout the holiday season. Anyway, let me take you into the software and show you how I created this. We're going to look at these files in VCarve Pro. Now, right out of the box, these are going to be compatible with Cut 2D Pro, VCarve Pro, and Aspire. And with a few edits, you can go ahead and use them in any of our desktop products. And when we get to the file that you're going to need to look at, I'll mention that to you, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to open an existing file. Now you're going to get 4 different files with this project, a design file, and then 3 tooling files. Okay, we're going to go through these one at a time and have a look at each one. Let's just first start off with the design file. So we'll open that up. And as always, you're going to be presented with the notes here at the start, and make sure that you understand the second part of this, which is our terms of use. There are no toolpaths in this, so you don't need to worry too much about that. And we're just going to click OK. Let's have a look at our actual job dimensions just really quickly. It's a single-sided job, 450 millimeters by 450 millimeters by about 12 millimeters thick. And we're going to set up the normal way we do everything, which is machining off our material surface. My data will be set to the center, which doesn't matter. This is just my design file, so I can move that later on. I'm going to use a modeling resolution that's a standard because there isn't any 3D content, and I'm going to use a solid color. It just makes it a little bit easier in this particular case, but you can choose whatever kind of material you want. This is just the design file, and we can just go ahead and click cancel. Let's have a look at our layers. So our layers are set up in a way that I'm actually going to build this thing. So first of all, we have our original design, which you see right there. We have our transformer location. We have our back, center, acrylic, and face. These are all layers of material that I'll be stacking up and gluing together to get the full depth of my finished product. First of all, here is our actual original design, which literally is just a bunch of rectangles and circles that I ended up welding together and then using the circle array copy tool and making the full design. Let's have a quick look at the rest of our actual layers. So instead of using our layers drop down, I'm going to go to our layers tab and I'll just turn these on and off as we go. So the first one here we see is the transformer location. Of course, with these LED lights, there is a transformer that you're going to need to account for. In this case, I'm going to stick it on the back, which I've made some contingencies for. We have our back layer, our center layer, our acrylic layer, and our face layer. Now, before we go through each one of those individually, I'm going to point out this little drawing I put at the very top. You'll see that our back layer is going to be made up of 6.35 millimeter plywood. The center is going to be 12 millimeter plywood, which happens to be the thickness of that is the width of the LED light, so I can stick them on the inside edge of that. And the acrylic is 3 millimeters, but it's going to be inset into the face, which is 6.35. So if you have VCarve Pro or Aspire or Cut 2D Pro, you're going to be able to cut the face and the back on the same piece of material, whereas if you've got the desktop versions, you're going to need to separate those two, okay? Now let's go ahead and have a look at each one of these individually so I can talk to you a little bit about the things that I built into this file. So let's start off with our back. So that's pretty easy. We've got a back surface that we're going to glue on the very back of our finished project. At the very top of this, there's a circle, and that's where a head of a screw can actually fit through, which is kind of nice for mounting on the wall. And these little holes here are actually going to be pockets that are going to cut right through the material, and that will allow any light or some light to escape out the back of this and actually shine around the outside of the snowflake. And you'll see how well that worked in the end. The center, that's pretty easy as well. There's another screw hole here, which is slightly larger than the other, so the screw can go in the back and then actually hook to something on the inside. There'll be a little tiny lip there once you glue it all up. At the very bottom here, there's a spot for the actual wiring to go up through. And I forgot to point out that on the back layer, there's actually a hole at the bottom here for the wiring to come through the back so that we can feed it up through so it'll hook to the LEDs properly. Let's go back to our center for a second. These 4 little boxes in the middle, they're actually going to be glued up one on top of each other to make 2 of these mounts that will actually lift the snowflake off the wall so that it will be approximately the same height as the thickness of the transformer. So that way it'll lay semi-flat against the wall where you're all done. Let's have a look now at the actual acrylic. That's just a circle of acrylic that fits inside a pocket on the back of the face. And here is the face, which is pretty easy. It's just an outline here along with some lines here to define a pocket. So that's pretty much the design. It really wasn't all that complicated once I got all the little bits kind of thought through. So let's go have a look at our tooling files now. Okay, let's go ahead and open up a file, and we're going to look at the lit snowflake tooling for the 6.35mm plywood. We'll open that up. And of course, we'll be presented with the notes again. Make sure that you read and understand all of these and change up the tooling to be safe and appropriate for your machine, okay? And we'll click OK to move past that. Now you'll see that I've divided this up into two parts. Now again, if you're using VCarve desktop or Cut2D desktop, then you got to break this up into two different files, just so that you can fit it in the envelope of that particular software. Okay, it's pretty easy to do, and I'm sure you know how to do that already. Let's have a quick look at the tooling then. We'll open that up. We'll pin that down. So this is three different tool paths here. We have the acrylic pocket, which essentially is just a pocketing out of the back side of the face. So we're going to cut the face so that the actual face that you'll see when you finish your project is actually the bottom of your material, because we need to pocket this out from one side. I didn't want to make a two-sided project for you. The next one is going to be the back holes. So that's essentially these holes where the screw head goes and also where the light will escape from the back of this particular project. And then we have our cutout toolpath in the end. So quick look at the acrylic pocket, which is not a big deal. We're going to cut down the thickness of our acrylic plus a little bit. We're going to use our compression tool for that, just so I don't have to change the tooling in the end, and that worked out okay. We're going to do offset tooling, and we just renamed it. So it's pretty easy to do. We'll close that down, and we have a quick preview of that just to see what we have there, and that's it. Not too fancy. So let's close that down, and let's have a look at the back holes. The same thing, start depth is at 0. Let's have a look at our 2D view. Actually, let's tile our view. That makes it a bit easier. And we're going to use that same compression bit that we used a minute ago, except we're going to cut all the way through the material. Okay, so it's a pocket cut. Offset tooling, it's going to take one pass. Did that on purpose so that I could take advantage of the end of that compression tool. And that's it. So we can calculate that. It's going to tell us that we're going to go ahead and cut through our material, but we know that, and we can preview our visible toolpath. And that's what we have in the end. Next, let's have a look at the cutout. So the cutout, we're going to have a start depth of 0. We're going to go down the full depth of our material plus a little bit. It's going to take one pass to do that. We're going to use that same compression cutter that we used before. And we're going to go outside those lines, and you'll see that I added in some tabs in some specific locations. I thought that would make things safe. And those are a good size. Now the project that I cut, they were only at 2 millimeters thick, but I thickened them up a little bit for you guys because they were a little bit thin for my cut. We're going to use ramps, so make sure you ramp in. There's a smooth ramp, and we are going to specify the ramp, and it's going to be the ramp on leading in, okay? And here are our leads. We're going to do a circular lead both ways, in and out, okay? And I'll point those out in a second, and we can go ahead and calculate that. Again, we're going to cut through our material, but we know that. We'll just click OK, and then we'll preview our visible toolpath. And there you can see there are our ramps and leads right there. That makes it so we're getting nice clean edges on our plywood all the way around without plunging directly through it. And it works out pretty nice. So that's it for this file. That's pretty easy. So let's close this one down, and let's go ahead and open up the other one. This is going to be the 12 millimeter one. We're not going to save off our file that we just created. Again, you're going to end up seeing these notes. Make sure you read and understand them like always. And let's have a look at our tooling. Okay, so let's move this over a little bit. We have two tool paths. It's pretty easy. We have one for our little screw head here, which is slightly bigger than the other one that you saw on the back. And then we have the cutout tool path. The screw head hole is going to be, we're going to start depth at 0. We're going to get down the thickness of our material plus a little bit using that same cutter, offset tooling, and we're going to go ahead and calculate that. It's going to tell us we're going to cut through. Let's close that down, and we'll preview that visible toolpath. And that's it, just a hole. Now let's have a look at the next bit, which is going to be the actual profile cut around the outside. We're going to do the same thing, start at 0, cut down the thickness of material plus 0.2, same compression cutter. We're going to cut outside the line. You'll see that added in some tabs. Same setup as the last file that we saw with ramps and leads. So I can calculate that, and we'll click OK, and we'll preview that visible toolpath. And there we have it, and that turns out pretty good. Again, I thickened up those tabs for you so that your parts wouldn't fall out like mine did. And we'll close that down. Now, let's have a look at the last file. So let's open that up, and that's going to be the acrylic file. Now, the last toolpaths, you saw that I used a compression cutter. Well, this is going to be using another special tool that we have, which is specially made to cut acrylic, and I've used it before. Make sure, again, that you understand these notes. Press OK. Let's take a look at our tooling. Now, with the acrylic, Another thing I want to point out is right here, we're using an allowance offset. So this is actually going to be smaller than the pocket that we're cutting on the back of our face by 1 millimeter all the way around. So it's 2 millimeters across the whole part. We're going to go down the thickness of the material plus a little bit. We're going to use my special acrylic cutter. So let's have a look at that. There's a setup for that in case you want to know what that is. Just click OK. We're going to cut outside the line. I've added in some tabs, very thin tabs though. That way they can break off with my thumb when I'm all done. I did not use ramps or leads like I did before. This is straight up, just down and cut, and off it goes. We can calculate that. Again, we know we're going to cut through our material. I can click OK, and let's preview that visible toolpath, and there we have it. So it's pretty easy. There's nothing really fancy about the tooling. It's more in how we're going to actually assemble this thing. So let's see it cut and how I've gone ahead and assembled this. So we'll start off with that 6 millimeter plywood and that compression cutter. We're going to do these all with one pass. And here we're going to cut out that pocket in the back of the face for the acrylic. And then we'll go ahead and cut the rest of the tool paths. You'll be able to see the leads here as we cut along, and they worked out really, really well. Took that off the machine, and then we go ahead and cut out those. Now again, those tabs are pretty thin, so the parts just kind of fell out really, really easy. Then we go ahead and dry fit that up to make sure everything works out okay. And that looks great. Now we're going to go ahead and put down that 12 millimeter plywood. And again, we're going to run all these tool paths with one pass. And using this 12 millimeter plywood really takes advantage of that compression cutter. And the cuts come out really nice and clean. Remove all those parts from the material. And then again, we test fitted that up to make sure everything fit together okay. Now it's time for the acrylic. I use double-sided tape to stick it down to the spoil board, and then we put in the acrylic cutter. I did this cut in 2 passes, and like I mentioned before, the tabs are really thin so I could easily break them off. And it fit like a glove. Test fit that back up again, and everything looked perfect. Now it's time for some sanding. Get rid of those tabs, and then some of the fuzzies that were left inside of those light holes. Used a paintbrush to paint on the PVA glue. Then we went ahead and clamped that together. We let it set up for a little bit, and while that was setting up, I had a chance to take a look at the manual for the lights. We used the double-sided tape that came along with the lights. This was a nice sort of cushiony tape that helped to stick it to that exposed edge of the plywood, and then lay in the LED lights after I measured and cut them. Did a little bit of wiring, and then laid in those beads. Now if I was going to do this again, I would use a bit of hot glue to hold those in place. The round beads ended up, when I picked it up, they kind of slid to the bottom of the cavity. Here we decided to glue on the face, which in hindsight, it would have been better to use double-sided tape. And then we gave it a nice test to make sure the lights worked perfect, and everything looks amazing. Well, that one was a lot of fun to make. I've never actually used LED lights like this before, but I think it came out pretty cool. If you'd like to make your own, why don't you head over to your V&Co account and download this project for free and cut it yourself. And if you do, why don't you post it in the forum or socially so that we can see that. Anyway, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do so you get notifications of our next video. I hope you're keeping safe, and from all of us here at Vectric, happy holidays.